Our kids will not have a passion for Christ unless we disciple them. And they will not be discipled unless we can relate to them. And we cannot relate to them unless we pray for them. So these three accounts intermingle with one another, are dependent on each other, and each one is absolutely critical to the other. Now, stepping back from that, let me just tell you about one of the discipleship groups that I led. 6:45 a.m., Chick-fil-A, Lawrenceville Highway, Lilburn, Georgia. Every Tuesday morning, I met with my son and 5 of his friends for 5 years to disciple those young men. They're pretty typical guys, typical high school guys. One of them was Tim Miller. I first met Tim Miller when he was 6 years old. When Tim was 6, he came over to our house to play with my son Jonathan for the first time, and he'd been at our house for a half an hour in the middle of winter now. He'd been at our house for a half an hour when he took all of our kids down to the basement and blew out the pilot light. And then, within that same 30-minute period of time, he found the laundry chute and took all of our kids down the laundry chute when before our kids didn't even know where the laundry chute was. That was one of the guys in my group. Then we had Trent Walters. Trent Walters was a hyperactive kid. And I remember one of my clearest recollections of Trent Walters was when we went on a mission trip to Romania, and we were in this camp, and we were staying on the second floor in a very small bunk room, and there were about 5 bunk beds in there. And on the first day of camp, we'd all gotten in there and gotten our gear in there, and Trent Walters is in there, and he's on the top bunk, and he's standing on the top of the top bunk, and he's so excited about being there that he just starts bouncing up and down on the bed. Well, every time he bounces on the bed, it's a low ceiling, so his head is hitting the ceiling. So he's bouncing and hitting his head on the ceiling, and every time he hits his head on the ceiling, he begins to laugh. So he's going this ha, 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 ha thing, you know? You go figure, I don't know. Kid's hyperactive. So those are the kind of guys that I had in the group. They were into basketball and they were into soccer. They struggle with lust. We talked about it about every 3 weeks. Some of them came from broken families and some of them came from regular families. Some of them had families that were struggling. All of them had issues in their lives. And we met every week to talk about how they could grow in their faith and their relationship to Christ. They'd get their chicken biscuit, and we'd sit down, and then I would say to them, okay, gentlemen, let's go, because we're here to become men of God. And from that point, we would simply pray together. We would have our discussion over the lesson that they had worked on. We'd talk about their personal lives and how that applied, and off to school they would go. That was my discipleship group. It was my investment that I was making in my son and my son's friends.